So starting now. So Max, it's good to have you on the show, and I can't wait to hear your stories. We met up on LinkedIn through Ron Craig, and I met up with Ron Craig through Gary Berman's show. So it's kind of like a weird triangle of events. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, Max, and then give us a little bit of your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So thanks, Mike, for having me on. I really appreciate it. In fact, quite honored. We were, I believe, on one of the Gary Bergman shows together previously. So it was great to get to learn about you then. So I am a cybersecurity, and I know some people hate the word SME, but I should say I'm a security SME, whether it's physical, organizational, personal, personnel, all things really security is what 25, almost 30 years of security, national security as well. As well as I know you have that background too. And I really live, eat, breathe, sleep security. In fact, working on my PhD in technology and innovation management, specializing in cybersecurity. So if I'm not doing security, my other job is I'm a mushroom farmer.
I find that super interesting. We'll dive into that a little bit later. So you do have a background in the U.S. Marine Corps as well, right?
Yeah, I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps and 2 in the Army before that. I actually joined the Army when I was a junior in high school and went to basic training in between my junior and senior year of high school.
That's awesome. What was your job in the Marine Corps?
It ended up being H411, which is logistics. I went into the Marine Corps, supposed to be in avionics, and went to school in Memphis, Tennessee, or Millington to be an avionics technician. But I like to have a little bit too much fun, more than the Marine Corps wanted me to have. So I got turned around and went into the logistics arena.
Yeah. I was in the Navy for a while, and for a good while, actually, 13 total years. But my specialty was cryptography. That kind of threw me into what I'm doing now and what I did, previously. So you also do this mushroom farming, which I find totally absolutely fascinating. And why don't you explain to the people that don't know exactly what you have going on, exactly what you're doing? Because we talked about it briefly about how mushrooms kind of mimic the human neural system, and the projects that you have going on with that. I find it totally fascinating because I'm really into neurology and things like that because of the fact that I have a neuro diverse issue. So why don't you dive into that?
Sure. So in fact, part of there is one. There we go. I'm working on putting some racks together for the farm just this morning, and sent my wife off to the farmer's market with about 30 pounds of mushrooms. So we currently are producing just north of 150 pounds of mushrooms a week, getting ready to expand to over 300 pounds a week, and that'll be happening in the very near future. But really, that's not the long-term goal. So I'll leave that hanging for a minute, and I'll go back to how and why I got into mushrooms. So it was a little over 3 years ago. My wife had an event, and she, I don't want to say lost her marbles, because it wasn't schizophrenia. She doesn't mind if I speak out of turn. She had a stroke. And so I started to do some research on how I can best help her and what I can do to help her through this emotional time. And I came across some really amazing research done by a gentleman named Paul Stamets. Paul Stamets is in British Columbia, as well as he has some facilities down in Washington and even, I think, Oregon. And Paul was doing a DARPA study for about 5 years on improving the soldier. And that was in many faucets. whether improving the circulatory system, the respiratory system, the neurologic system. And he was able to find that or prove that certain mushrooms enhance all of those to where he was seeing 10 to 20% gains in whether neurologic functions, circulatory functions, respiratory functions. And it was just amazing to see such results. And so I started to look into it even more and found the Japanese culture in the Eastern medicine has been using mushrooms for thousands of years. And what's really amazing is whenever you look at the mycelium, which is what uh, grows or is what the basis for growing the fruited body mushroom that we all tend to consume. It's that mycelium. It looks, if you were to slice a human brain and look at all the neurological connections, they look really similar. In fact, and they grow a lot the same way. And one of those mushrooms that you can enhance, or the mycelium that you can ingest, is lion's mane. And lion's mane is the only substance known to humankind that you can ingest that'll help grow brain stem cells. And so I started giving this to my wife after her event, and now to this day she takes it quite often. But it's really incredible how much it's helped her in her recovery. And a lot of the Japanese in their culture sends folks to live out in the woods, and I so happen to live out in the woods. But it's that living out in the woods, or what they call a walk in the woods, and having that peace and quiet, that serenity, as well as eating right, and eating in particular mushrooms really improves the recovery time for people that have had stroke, as well as multiple forms of cancer. So the power of mushrooms is absolutely incredible. And so that's what started me down this path, but that's not the end game. And so if you've talked to Ron, you might have heard a little bit about the end game, and they've had the privilege of being published by other authors and researchers. I am actually looking to make a mycelium-based satellite and launch it into space. That's really the end goal. And there's a lot of things that I need to do between now and then to get me there. But boy, it's an exciting ride.
Yeah, that to me is totally fascinating. So when I was in London, I got diagnosed with epilepsy. And so I went to an Eastern medicine doctor, and, she was great. She was from China. She, went back and forth, got her herbs. She did everything out of the house, totally Eastern medicine. Some of it tasted really horrible, but it had such great benefit. There was actually one medicine that she gave me. It was like a ball, and you let it dissolve in your mouth, and it's the most bitter tasting, horrible medicine, but it's great. It's fantastic. I mean, it like subsided my seizures for a period of time. And then they make a tea, and I think that's probably how a lot of the mushrooms, because I know that there was mushrooms in that tea, but there were things like all kinds of herbs. There was even a bark of some special tree that was in this medicine, and you boil it and then you drink it, and it doesn't taste quite, it's not the type of tea that you would, serve guests or whatever, but it opened up, different pathways, is what she said. The more you drank, and the more often, it would open up the different pathways through the body for different reasons, whether it be cardiac or whether it be like neurology. There was always a special type of tea that you would drink to help those pathways improve. So yeah, like that type of medicine really interests me a lot. And I think it's really beneficial. I think that we have gotten away from what true solutions are and kind of patched a patch that's patching a patch with like current, modern day pharmacology. You take a pill to kill the symptoms of another pill. It's ridiculous. So with that being said, like the satellite idea, so I love space. For one, space totally intrigues me. I'm always watching the Gaia channel and checking out, the different deep space theories and stuff like that. But the satellite is really, it's a fascinating idea. And I definitely want to see like some more, like when you publish more of it, I would love to sit down and have a chat with you about that. Which brings me to our next topic is your work with Abile, right? Is it okay? So explain a little bit of your work for Abile and what you do for them and what the mission is.
Sure. So, Abile Group is a collection of highly intelligent, smart, innovative people, and they are working to keep this country safe, sound, and secure. Uh, Predominantly, Abile Group works in the DoD space in the intelligence community. I fortunately work with that group right there. And often you see me walking around wearing my NASA shirts because I really do believe in the NASA mission, which also kind of helps for the long term to build that space satellite to get to know the right people. But if you, like they say about many things, if you want to be a millionaire, you hang around with millionaires. Well, if you want to go to space, you hang out with those that want to go to space. And so I do have the pleasure of helping Abile Group build out their business. And currently, I am working as a subcontractor to Peraton on a contract called the Sense program. It's about 900 plus individuals. Uh, and most of them are engineers, and they brought me on board as the security subject matter expert. So, yes, in fact, I am an actual SME. And so, whenever anyone has any questions, concerns about security, and physical security, one of my previous lifetime roles, I helped stand up TSA, and I was responsible for launching the security of all the federalized airports in Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And that involved working with about 3,400 people and coming together as one in standing up security in those airports. So I really do look at security through a broad lens, because even though cybersecurity is, I would say, my deep technical experience, but you have data security. Cybersecurity would be meaningless if we didn't take care of our data and secure that. And really, when you look at security across all forms, it's about three things: people, process, and technology. And I say it in that order for a reason, because security doesn't work. It's the process is not followed, is not leveraged. The technology is meaningless if people don't practice security and practice that cyber hygiene, security hygiene. So when I look at security, I really look at it as there are 7.8 billion people on this earth, and none of them practice security the same. But in the cybersecurity or the technical security, that's just some ones, some zeros, and a little bit of hardware. And then there's the process piece, and there's a little bit more to the process than the zeros and ones and the hardware. But that's getting everybody to sing from that same sheet of music. So whenever I look at security, what uses most of my time, what takes most of my time, what takes most of my effort, it deals with people. And there's a lot of conversations. And that's one of the reasons why I call myself the cyber farmer, because what I do is it's all about sowing seeds of cybersecurity. It's putting in those little nuggets and then watering them, giving them the care and feeding that they need, making sure that they're in the right conditions to grow and be bountiful. So that's how my farming life and my cyber life come together, and why I call myself a cyber farmer.
That's pretty awesome. I like the theory. Also with NASA. So I have a close tie with NASA, actually. I grew up in a city that was called Space City down in Houston. Literally, the kids who had parents that were astronauts went to my school. all the way from elementary to high school. So, when Challenger had the accident, a lot of those kids, I knew some of those kids, like Ellison Onizuka's kids. It was a very traumatic event, I think, for everybody. But to see the progress that we're making in space, SpaceX putting up I think it was 4 individuals into space.
They're up there right now.
Yeah, far orbiting, farther than Amazon and all those guys. This was actually what they say 300 miles into space, I think.
Yeah, they're on the side of the Hubble as well as the other side of the space station.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. What do you think is the number one cybersecurity concern when it comes to space exploration?
Wow, there's so many, but I would go back to the way I look at things. It's really people. The people act differently in space. They think different. And Chris, I want to say Hedges. That's not right. Chris Hassenfield. He was the astronaut originally from Canada, and flew some fighter jets in the Air Force, I believe it was, with Navy. You probably know that one better than I. But Chris Haddonfield talks about how when you go into space, your mind changes. You think completely different. And I think that's really going to be an important part of security in the future, especially as we look to space. Right now, we're in a space race between China and between the U.S. And there's a lot of challenges there in itself. So we have these two cultures, groups of people, and they are in a race to see who gets there first, to see who dominates. And that's a fear for me. That's a real concern, because what happens when one dominates? Well, then the other doesn't get to write history, and the other gets suppressed. And whenever you're suppressed, you become a lot like the Taliban, and you become now looking at things through a guerrilla warfare lens. And so the way we look at security today and securing space, I don't think it's going to be anything remotely close to like the way we're going to secure space in 10 to 20 years from now, when it's commercialized and everybody gets out there and everyone has these eye-opening moments. Much like now, I have a security clearance, so I can't do those magic mushrooms. But I've been told that whenever you take those magic mushrooms, it changes your brain. It rewires things. And much can be said in the same way when you go to space. It's going to rewire your brain. Gravity acts differently on your brain, or the lack thereof. So your neural network, it's going to reprogram itself as we go out into space. And so the hackers today are going to be advanced hackers tomorrow, because of space, as well as we get into artificial intelligence and integrating Neuralink into our heads. We are going to have a completely different way that we look at security in 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I was really excited and kind of shocked when the military decided to create Space Force. When the Air Force came out with that, kind of like a drone, a space drone, an unmanned spaceship. I thought that was pretty ingenious, but it was kind of scary in the same token, because I think the first person to mention the conflict in space was Ronald Reagan. And since then, it got kind of quiet. And then we actually stopped the space exploration program for a period of time. And then all of a sudden went from that to, we need Space Force and we need commercial missions into space, and we need to vamp this up pretty quickly. And I don't know what was pushing that, but I'm sure there's tons of theories out there, but it's a really exciting time to be involved in space aeronautics and stuff like that. I think that with people like Elon Musk coming up with, SpaceX and commercial space flight. I think it's really cool. But in the same token, to me, like being able to put civilians into space is a great idea. But I think it's such a sacred thing, right? I think the select few should be able to go, because I do agree with you, the fact that it does change your view. It rewires your brain, but not only that, but it changes the way you look at life in general. And I think that's a special thing that we should like make sure that we protect in the future's generation in the future. I've had a chance to talk with some astronauts and hear their stories about space, and just hearing them describe what it looked like, what it felt like the first time they went into space was just, I could sit there and listen to them for hours, because it's something most of us will never get to experience. But hearing them tell the stories and the scientific experiments that they conducted while in space was fantastic. So you mentioned psilocybin and the magic mushrooms. So interesting story. In my younger years, I tried psilocybin. I'm probably the only human that is immune to psilocybin. Literally, it has zero effect on me whatsoever.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was really wanting to experience that, when I was younger. I wanted to experience that I guess mind journey, and took a little bit, chewed it up, swallowed it, nothing. Took some more, nothing. I mean, it was an unreal amount, and still nothing happened, and I was really disappointed.
Wonder if the epilepsy had anything to do with that, because that's a neurological issue that you had going on, and it sounds like there could very well be a connection.
Yeah, I started to think that as well. The only effect that I had from the psilocybin was a stomach ache, because I had ate so much. I think I ate over an ounce. It was quite a bit. It was a large amount, and no neurological effects, no mind trip, just a stomach ache. So you might be right. Maybe that pathway, maybe that neural pathway was blocked by the epilepsy, or the tremors that constantly are like right under the surface. And maybe that kept me from experience that euphoric feeling or whatever. But I
Well,
do, huh?
if I do decide to go for a second PhD, which I'm actually kind of thinking about, that's actually a great study, because I'm not aware of anyone doing a study looking at folks with epilepsy and other neurological challenges or
Mhm.
diseases, and whether or not magic mushrooms would assist or have no effect. So that would be an interesting study.
I would absolutely volunteer for that study too, because I'd like to know more about the way my brain functions. I have a lot of weird things that go on neurologically. I have the epilepsy, and then I'm on the spectrum as well. So there's a lot of things that I've tried to figure out over the years, and experimenting with different things, and still trying to figure it out. So another question, and I know you probably get this a lot, being affiliated with NASA. So I've watched the Gaia channel. I've watched all these documentaries. I'm a documentary freak. I watch documentaries all the time. So life beyond Earth, what's your take?
Wow. Yeah, it's so vast. There's there are more stars than there are grains of sand on the earth. And each star we know has at least one, more like multiple planets. Just by the sheer numbers, you would think that there is some other life form out there. Granted, the odds of me, you, Alex, Kim being born were tremendous. In fact, the odds of us hitting another lottery like that again um, are probably unlikely. But the odds of another civilization are actually smaller than an individual life. So if that's the case, if I was born under these tremendous odds, what's to say that there isn't another form of life when there's smaller odds for that? And I'm not necessarily, I think that people probably have seen things. I had I'll call it an event many, many years ago back in when I lived in Kansas. It's funny how people see things in Kansas. But I had something come from way up out in space down somewhat close to me and then came alongside me in a parallel fashion, hovered. And by this time, I stopped my Jeep, and I had no doors, no top on my Jeep, so I always had a visual sighting on this. And the road was straight for miles, so I could just even drive without even looking and watch. And then it hovered and took off straight up in the air. I don't know what I saw. I know I wasn't on anything, but when you talk about documentaries, there are documentaries out there that have proven that our reality is not really reality. So what one person sees is not what another person sees. And so I'm not sure what I saw. I saw something, and it's embedded in my brain. So I'm open to believing that there is a possibility, and that maybe one day we'll find out what is hopefully real. Otherwise, we'll continue to live in this simulated reality that we're sharing today.
It's very strange you mentioned that. So I did a lot of like study, like just as a hobby, on the way the mind matrixes different things. So your mind is expecting to see one thing, and it may not actually be that thing, but because the mind expects to see that, that's what you see. That's how it's formed in your mind. And I've also we were talking about AI with Max Hennemeyer from Dark Trace, and we got into the conversation of when are we going to have true AI? And Max brought up a really good point about consciousness and how we can't really have true AI until we actually are able to define what consciousness really is. And I thought that was a really good point. I went off on a rabbit hole trying to look at that and trying to, figure out why that we don't know what is consciousness and what's not. I went to the zoo a couple of weeks ago, and there was a little black crested monkey from the Congo, and he was just kind of wandering around. I sat down on a ledge, and this monkey walks up to me, and we had this full-on nonverbal conversation. And when we made eye contact, you could tell there was some level of consciousness there. With some animals, you look at them and you make eye contact, and it may or may not be there, right? And you look at a fish, you can tell there's no consciousness as we know it. But this monkey, it was so fascinating. Like, he would look at my tattoos, and he would look at his arm, and he'd look at me and make eye contact. Like, why do you have that and I don't? So it'll be interesting to figure out if we ever are able to figure out what exactly is true consciousness. And I saw another one on Gaia channel just the other day about we have black holes. The theory of a black hole is pretty prevalent, but I also heard the theory of white holes, where energy comes from the center of what would be a black hole and can actually, you can go into, well, the theory is you can go into a white hole and end up being in a different place and point in time based on how the white hole actually works and transfers energy and all that stuff. So space travel, I mean, if I wouldn't want to be the astronaut testing that theory, but they said that eventually we're going to get to a point where we can test that theory in space. But yeah, I mean, just a lot of fascinating theories regarding space because there's so much unknown. And like you said, there's more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand. And when you think about that, I mean, that is astronomical. So I keep holding to this hope and this belief that, there is life out there beyond us. And I think the big supporting factor behind that was, and it made me feel good, was the fact that the Navy released those videos of the F-16s chasing these unknown objects that would be there 1 minute and gone the next. And it's on radar. It's not like it's a commercial pilot, saying, "Hey, I saw something." No, this is actual proof. Now whether it's an actual like unidentified object from some other, solar system or whatever, or if it's technology that somebody has here on Earth that we don't know about. I think the latter would be the scariest thought, because if we have that capability here on Earth now and nobody knows about it, and it gets into the wrong hands, we could be in a lot of trouble as a country for national security.
Oh, absolutely. And depending on who you talk to, they will say that we've already talked to these alien beings, and which is why we have some of the technology that we have. And why people talk about Area 64, right?
Area 51.
51, thank you. But like you're talking about with the Navy releasing the video, and I forget the commander's name, but extremely credible individual. And he wasn't going out there publicizing it and trying to make money off of it. In fact, he hates to even talk about the event, which makes me even say that there's more credibility there, because he does talk about it, but it's not like he's looking to go out to the media, because really it's hard to believe the media nowadays.
Yeah.
But there's we talked about black holes, and for years, my man Einstein there, he didn't believe in black holes for like 20, 30 years as a scientist. And finally, I forget who it was that proved to him that black holes exist. So if the smartest man on Earth at that particular time, and maybe still, did not believe in something, but yet was able to change his mind because somebody was able to prove it, the likelihood that there is some type of other being out there, I think, can and will be proven someday. And that's just a matter of time. And it's funny that time, it might be part of that equation on how to move through space-time, and utilizing those white holes to transport us from one point in space-time to another. So there's just so many aspects of the future that I'm so interested in. I actually believe I'm going to be able to live and see many of them. I tell people I'm going to live to be 300. They're like, "What? Get out of here!" Well, I have two words for you to tell people why I believe that. One is called nanobots, and the other is called 3D printers. And 3D printers is something that we're using right now to print human skin. We're creating and we're printing bones that can actually be put into people. And in the near future, we'll be putting in livers and in hearts. We're already doing that in animals. And I would think that maybe one day, who knows, we'll even get to the brain. We got to figure out the brain first. But nanobots is something that we can put into our blood. They're not quite there yet, but once we can, how many nanobots do we need to clean our skin or our blood? You're talking about, you can take 1,500 nanobots on the tip of a pen. And is that all you need, is 1,500 to clean your skin? And if that's the case, you're able to regenerate your blood. So that between regenerating my blood and 3D printers, who's to say that I'm not going to live a very, very long time?
I mean, if you would have told somebody in the 1800s that someone with a condition like mine, that we would have a device implanted in our chest that would help us keep our heart beating, they would have thought you were crazy.
Right.
I mean, we've come a long way in a very short window of time. And I think, the more that we learn and the more that we get computing and distributing computing and large, like quantum computers involved in doing some of this research, I think the chances of getting to a point where we can reach that age is not unseeable. I was talking to somebody the other day about using AI and some of the large distributed computing centers to look at and help to predict the future strains of the COVID-19. And I don't know if they're doing it yet or not, but I thought that would be like that would be a great idea. If you take some of these diseases and run through AI scenarios with the different breakdowns and genetics of the viruses or diseases and have the AI play through it and get to a point where we can do that and predict where the disease is going to go, it'll save a lot of time. I watched a movie or a documentary called AlphaGo,
Yes.
and I loved it. It was how Google created that AI player and beat one of the champions of Go. And I don't know if you've ever played Go or not, but it's a very strategic, very in-depth, complex thinking game. It's been around for thousands of years. And for Google to sit down and interview some of these people, come up with some equations, and beat one of the top champions blew my mind. And you could see where it was making strides, right? You could see where it was making predicted, behaviors and moves, which, they expected. But then there was a point in time where it went outside of the bounds of what they would expect and made a move that everybody was shocked, but still was able to win the tournament. The Google bot actually lost that round, but went on to beat the guy, and the guy actually beat the computer a couple of times. And it was exciting to see that level of computing and I guess science come together and take down one of the champions. And to be a champion, if anybody knows anything about Go, to be a champion, a world champion in Go, you are one smart cookie. Like it's tough. So I think that's really exciting as well, looking at AI and bringing AI into different aspects of life too.
And then in addition to Go, they had AlphaGo, which taught itself the game and beat Go. So the fact that we're able to have machines teach themselves and end up being dominating in that area, that kind of actually takes us back to cybersecurity that we're seeing now. And right now we're in a world where we're just starting to see bot versus bot. And so I kind of even have to wonder how secure is my job if there's going to be AI to do the job of cybersecurity in the future.
Well, I think when it comes to AI, and I had the same thought too. I kind of went over it for a couple of days trying to figure out, at what level we're going to need humans when we do get AI complete honed. And my thought is you can't replace the human creativity and the human personalities with AI. I think that is even further off in the future than getting computers to make decisions. Because I think that's where humans are unique, is we do have that emotional sense. And sometimes we think with emotion, sometimes we think with creativity, and we take risks that probably computers wouldn't go outside of certain bounds. So I think we'll always need humans to interact with these AI platforms in order to have it progress and really give it the human touch. Where I get concerned is when we do get to the point where AI and different systems can take into those emotional thoughts and those emotional decisions and those risk-based decisions and make them their own. And I think at that point we would have a problem. And I think that we would have to have humans helping to control those AI platforms, because I think they could get out of control. Like when you look back at the old movie War Games, right? Epic movie. Yeah, epic movies. And the Whopper actually starts going off and making decisions of its own. And it thinks it's playing a game, and it really was. But I mean, it really spun up the military and caused like a global reaction to what was going on. And I see, like, if we don't handle AI correctly, not necessarily war games happening, but things could go things could go awry really quick. So I'm really excited about that, but I'm more excited too about, what we're doing with space and satellites. So you mentioned that your end goal for, the mushrooms and the mycelium satellite. Um, Satellite exploration is really awesome. And I got into ham radio years ago, and they have a satellite that's up there for us to use as well. But where I get concerned is where you have people like Elon Musk throwing internet service into satellites into space. And as a hacker, I look at that as, wow, if I can grab a satellite that produces internet connectivity, what else can I do with that satellite? How can I weaponize that satellite? So now that we're getting more commercial into space and throwing more satellites up there, we're creating our own threat landscape in space. And so what are your thoughts on that and weaponizing satellites and the capabilities?
So I was actually on, we talked about Gary Bergman earlier. I was on a podcast or video cast with Gary Berman, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Matt Dish, who is the CEO of Iridium. Mm-hmm. And I brought up that there is a hacker group of university students, and I want to say, I don't remember off the top of my head if they were out of Cambridge or somewhere exactly here in the US. And for some reason, I want to say it was here in the US. But the group of hackers, those students, were hacking space satellites with $300 worth of equipment. Mm-hmm. And there's a really great Freethink video on that, this particular subject. Just search for Freethink and hacking satellites for $300. So if we're able to hack satellites with less than $300 worth of equipment, that price is only going to decrease as time goes on. Mm-hmm. So in a matter of 24 months, we'll be able to hack those satellites for $150. Two more years after that, we'll be able to hack it for $75. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of time where it's going to be $5 worth of material, and you're able to hack these satellites. So we really have to be mindful of how we build in or bake in security. And so here's a great reason why we have to think like this. So when we launched Voyager back in 1977, mm-hmm. NASA never once thought about security. They never spoke about security. It was never a requirement. And since then, we've launched many satellites into space. Well, up until not too long ago, those were only engineers. Engineers don't think security. They don't talk security. They have checklists. And nowhere on those checklists that say, hey, we have to have encryption on all of our data streams. We have to have multi-factor authentication. And so because of those engineers, not too long ago, they didn't think about security. Hacking those systems really can be quite easy to do. Mm-hmm. So as I work with NASA today, I remind them often that we're thinking about security and what it's going to look like 25 and 50 years from now. Because Voyager was launched in space almost 50 years ago, and it's still active today. We're still operating those systems, and we have to protect those systems that nobody thought about protecting back then. And so artificial intelligence, it's one of those things that we're going to absolutely have to leverage to help us modernize and secure those antiquated systems of yesterday.
Yeah, the state that cybersecurity is and defense, cyber defense, when it comes to space travel, I go back to the fact that most people think that we're alone up in space, right? So why do you need to protect systems, But if I can reach the ISS with a handheld amateur radio and communicate with the ISS, we have problems, because I know that they haven't built the ISS with that same regard as well. So who's to say someone with a decent sized antenna can't hit the ISS and disable systems that are emitting RF? Because a lot of it is based on RF and positioning. I got the opportunity to watch the ISS fly over Houston during a certain period of time, and they would publish what times that we're going to fly over our area. And literally, it was the most amazing thing to look up and see this thing. And you can tell it's the ISS, like you can visibly see the structure fly over at a speed. I mean, it was pretty awesome. But just to have that touch with space was pretty cool. But I started thinking about it. I was like, I hack Wi-Fi all the time, and I can communicate with the ISS through a very small device that puts off little amounts of energy. And I wonder what other systems I can hit on that craft or on that installation. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think that with more people going into space and that space race, I can't help but think that, between us and China, there's going to be a cyber battlefield in space to keep each other from making those advancements. I mean, if you look back, the Russians, they were pretty early into space. They had the animal that went into space and stuff like that. And we were, shortly behind that period. But we did make a lot of the milestones in space. But back then we didn't have the cyber war that we have now. And I think that, this space race, we're going to see a lot of sabotage and a lot of going back and forth in space through technology. And I think satellites are going to be the biggest target, which brings into mind another topic too, is that GPS positioning system satellites up in space that help ships navigate maritime. So there was a period of time, a couple of years ago probably, that the Navy actually collided with another ship. And knowing the systems that are on those big battleships and those carriers and stuff like that, and even the smaller ships, that doesn't happen. Like that is a very, very rare occurrence if it's ever happened, other than those handful of times. And I can't help but think that somebody got into the GPS positioning satellites and was manipulating coordinates, manipulating the systems themselves. What's your theory on that?
Oh, absolutely. I believe that can happen. In fact, I wrote an article on LinkedIn. It's been a couple of years now, a few years actually, where I actually talk about that very challenge with maritime GPS, and how it's not going to be a challenge. As we talked about, they're hacking our satellites for less than $300. And all they have to do is take over the GPS signal that is going to the ship to redirect, and they can easily redirect the ship. So I absolutely see that very much as concern. And we're going to have space pirates, because they're going to actually be hacking the signal and redirecting, whether it's the goods here on terra firma or actually up in the stars.
And that's pretty awesome too. When I think about that new frontier of hacking, this may sound really bad, but I would like to be part of that pirate crew. That frontier group that learns how to do these things, and not maliciously, but being able to say that I can take a satellite signal and manipulate it would be, I mean, as a hacker, that is like God level. If you can manipulate things in the stars, that is like, you can't touch that. So I think that'd be really cool. I'm going to open it up to questions. I know that we have Alex and Kim on. If you guys have any questions, fire away.
Yeah, I hope you're all doing well, guys. I think the question I had, and I actually been thinking about it for the past couple of podcasts, is nobody's talking about quantum computing, especially that a lot of companies claiming already to be very close to having one. Some of them, I think, even claim that they have one, but there was no really proper news about it or evidence. Nonetheless, I mean, the possibility of quantum computing and what it presents to the world is obviously beyond our imagination. I don't think so many people still understand. But nonetheless, I think we're talking about a lot of challenges, what current technology presents to us and things like that. But the quantum computing will kind of open up a new realm, not to just defense, because that brings a lot to defense as well, but to a lot of developments and discoveries. And obviously AI especially, right? The modules that it can run. So yeah, I think I just wanted to take both of your opinions on quantum computing and what it brings to the table.
I'll let you go first, Max.
Thanks, Mike. So if you talk to a quantum physicist, they're going to say that anybody who says that they truly understand quantum technology does not understand quantum technology. That doesn't mean that we can't somewhat comprehend or have a belief or vision of what that might look like. But to actually understand the power and the capability, I'm thinking that once we start plugging in with the Neuralink and we become symbiont with technology, then we're going to start understanding quantum technology and what that truly means and where we're going to go.
Yeah, sorry, it was on mute. I absolutely agree with that. The Neuralink project, I think, is both exciting and scary at the same time. To be able to read one's thoughts based on, how the brain functions and stuff like that. I think it's really exciting. Yeah, I thought it was really cool when they came up with the device to implant into the brainstem to help people with massive seizure disorders kill that response. Things like that. The small advances I think are going to be really good. And it's going to go really fast. And to be honest with you, I'm trying to figure out, and I've traced it back, trying to figure out how we've gone through such technological strides in such a short period of time. That to me is more interesting and more, I guess, researchable than quantum computing, because you're right. If anybody says that they understand quantum physics or can even fathom what quantum computing is really going to be like, they really don't understand. And I go back to, take Searle for instance, right? And you look at the way that people have chased the God particle and tried to recreate the Big Bang and the environmental variables that go with it, trying to recreate, mankind or how we came about. Not only is it dangerous and can cause, very large mass casualties, but it's also, do we really want to be able to have that control? Do we want humans to have the ability to create a God particle or that black particle? I think it's a great idea, but it scares me in the same token. Same thing with quantum computing. Do we really want to master that art? Do we really want to get to the point where we can harness that capability? Because, you look at places like North Korea, right? And how apt they are to pressing a button and destroying whole civilizations. With great power comes great responsibility. And I don't think as a human race, we're to that point where we can harness that type of power and be responsible with it. We have leaders on earth making really piss poor decisions right now, and they're very archaic decisions. Like you take Afghanistan, for instance, and pulling troops out of Afghanistan, and how much of a failure that was. And we're going to put quantum computing and the ability to create the God particle in their hands. Can you imagine if we have a tyrannical leader that wants to do everybody in, and we have that type of power? I don't think as humankind yet we're ready for that. Now, the situation where I think that it will bring us all together is if we have an outside variable become a threat or become a true variable. Like if there's life outside of Earth and we get introduced to that, I think as a civilization, we're going to come together. I think it's going to take an event like that to be able to bring us to that that responsible level where we can harness the power of quantum computing or quantum physics, along with, the type of research that's going on with the God particle.
Yeah, and you talk about our leaders, and we have a Lieutenant Colonel Marine who is possibly going to lose many things because he is publicly stated about how our leaders aren't taking accountability. And the last thing I want to do is put AI in their hands. Unfortunately, we have this thing called the military-industrial complex that there is nothing that they don't weaponize. And I think it's important that we in the cybersecurity field tap in and become symbionts as quickly and as soon as possible, because we as humans have values, have ethics, have morals that that AI doesn't have. You talked about conscience earlier. And if we don't become symbiotic with that technology, then it's that artificial intelligence, it's going to rule, it's going to take over, because we've programmed it to win, and to win at all costs. And they really won't care about human life. Even though Isaac Asimov has the 3 rules for robotics, when it comes to the military-industrial complex, that's going to be thrown out the window. In fact, I was actually thinking about doing a dissertation, or my dissertation on the ethics for artificial intelligence, and it probably became a little bit more of a challenge than what I was looking at. So actually, this is a great time for a plug to, especially many of your audience. So I am doing a dissertation on innovating the hacker. In particular, is innovating the hacker for space-based systems. So I would love to send a survey to anyone who's interested. I'm going to try to anonymize it. Very good. And keep things as anonymous as possible. But we need to figure out how we can innovate the hacker, because the hacker can be the most powerful person on earth. We as individuals can either make or break this world that we're going to be collectively living in. All it takes is one person to hack into a space-based satellite that has nukes on it and start, rain some nasty stuff down on this earth. So we, as hackers, need to understand what ethics and values truly mean to us as humans, and understand how they're going to be probably the most powerful person on earth, or powerful thing, because once we do become this symbiotic thing, and which is not going to be far away. I mean, they're talking about, we're already looking at 3D printing eyeballs. It's been put one into a person's skull. They haven't been able to see in over 10 years, and now they can see. Well, if they're connected to the internet through their eyeball, that's just one of many things that is going to make us a more advanced, more intelligent, the next thing, and I forget what they're calling it. So Homo sapien will go away, much like that of Homo. I forget what the other one was. They have the Neanderthal that we killed off.
Homo erectus.
Right. Thank you. And that next form of humanity, that's coming with this version of becoming a symbiotic with technology. And you talked earlier about when is that going to come? Well, I'll give you an idea. Take the last 100 years of humanity, okay? And everything that's happened in the last 100 years. Take all of that technological innovation and crunch it into a 10-year time frame, And that's what's going to happen to us in the next 10 years.
Mhm.
Right. Hey, Kim, I love Kim's comments. Thank you, because they've been making me smile. But Moore's law is definitely part of it. And so if the next 10 years is 100 years worth of technology, what's the next 20?
Mhm.
And so in 20 years, the world that we know of today is not going to look anything like it does in 2020,
Mhm.
because today's world doesn't look like it did in 1900. When I was a little boy, I actually thought about what it would be like to talk to somebody anytime I wanted around the world at any given point in time.
Mhm.
I can do that nowadays with this little device. This little device is really soon going to be right here.
Mhm.
And I really think that that's going to be less than 20 years time frame from right now. And we're going to need to actually do that, because Elon Musk has said artificial intelligence could be like summoning the beast.
Mhm.
And the only way that we're going to protect ourselves from that beast is to become one with it.
Right. And I totally agree with that. The Neuralink project, I was watching some videos on that, and it's pretty amazing. But we talked about responsibility and power, right? And power in the wrong hands. Could you imagine if we started AI back in a time of, let's say we hooked Adolf Hitler into Neuralink? Can you imagine the devastation that would occur? Or if someone got involved with creating the God particle, or hijacked that science, right? And we've seen that, back during World War II, and you looked at some of the technology that the Nazi Germany, was creating, like the Bellcraft, right? The Bellcraft was an actual hovercraft that actually worked. Where they got that technology from slays me. There was theories that, they had UFOs or crash UFOs that they were able to reproduce or whatever. But regardless of where that technology came from, that was above what we have even today. Just if you take today and look at the advances that they were making back in 1943, and if you take that amount of advance and put it now, it's crazy what we could do. Speaking of the internet and body parts connected to the internet, when I start feeling a little funky, I have a little device that I hold up to my chest, and it communicates through the internet and tells the doctor what rhythm I'm in, or what the telemetry looks like. And if you would have said 50 years ago that's what was going to happen to people, they would have thought you were crazy, absolutely insane. And I think it's going to go even further than that. So there's been studies that show that people have the innate ability built in to be able to do things like see in other places without actually having to be there. Remote viewing was an actual project by the Army and proved that it worked. I've actually toyed with that science a little bit, and I was shocked. I was shocked to know that what kind of capability you have if you're connected to somebody or connected to an object, like really connected, like you focused and have some sort of, relationship or connection to that person or that object, what you can actually do. And it's true. I mean, I think we're all interconnected. I think life in general is interconnected at some level. And if we can tap into that's huge. That's really big. But I do think it's going to take an outside influence in order to get us all to act as one. I wish it would happen soon, because it seems like over time, civilization in general and the mentality is just deteriorating. Society in general, and the way people act and react, and the decisions that are made at a top level, it just seems to get darker and darker. And I think it's going to take one of those outside motivations to bring it all back. So I was involved in a project, and you probably heard about it, Project Tularosa, that the Department of Energy put on, Department of Defense, and Sandia National Labs. And I was talking to a retired CIA agent this week about the research that I went through. I was a subject in this project. So what they did, you're talking about hackers and technology and quantum computing. So what the military and the DOE and Sandia National Labs tried to do was look at the attacker and look at the the biofeedback and telemetry that they received on their end when we would hack into a system. So they put me behind a SCADA system, hooked me up to a bracelet that looked at perspiration, heart rate, all that stuff, monitored my eye movement, keystrokes, and had me hack into these different machines. And with that, they're trying to create deception technology based on biofeedback. So the government is making steps to understand that connection with technology. And like you said, I don't think it's going to be too far off before they really tap into it. And I hope they're responsible with that data and the way that they go about it, because building the ultimate killing machine, I don't think is going to be the answer to advancement. I think that we need to be able to create that type of technology, but in a helpful way.
Yeah, and boy, you're really hitting the nail on the head. When somebody asks me what scares me, what keeps me up at night, it's humanity, and we now have leaders or people who are supposed to be in leadership positions that can't lead or don't lead us, and we have the military-industrial complex that takes over half of the funding that country operates on, and we're not using that funding for peace. We're using it for war, and we have such a political war-driven machine that we don't have a left and a right anymore. They're both one and the same.
Exactly.
And so they're both trying to be polarizing, and yet they're making everybody kind of hate one another. And when you have all of that hate, it grows.
Mm-hmm.
More hate. And if we don't have something that unifies us as humanity, I really think that we're all doomed. And it scares the crap out of me, because we're constantly promoting right and wrong, and there's never a gray area. And that's why I love hackers, because hackers live in that gray area.
Mm-hmm.
And hackers tend to understand, even when they do things that are wrong, they're often doing it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. And that's not what our leaders do today. Right. They're doing it because it lines their pockets. It gives them more power. And hackers, they're not looking or interested at really more power. They're looking at more knowledge, learning. And it's one of the reasons why I love being in the technology field, and in particular cybersecurity. There's a reason why I have all those books back there. Mm-hmm. It's because I am constantly learning, striving to improve myself, to make myself better. And I wish more people would do that, because we now have humanity that their attention span has went from 12 minutes to like 2 minutes. Mm. And we live on these 30-second sound bites, and people don't dig in to learn more and figure out what that means. And that's again why I love hackers, is because they're not necessarily believing the sound bites. They're digging in. They're trying to learn and understand more. And we really need more of that in humanity. People trying to learn and understand, and not just blindly follow. So I have real hopes for like quantum technology and how that's going to help us. But I also have a lot of fear that people are going to keep us from getting there and being successful as humans.
Yeah, and when you take Nikola Tesla, for example, in the strides that he was making in advancement, and what the FBI did to him to shut him down and destroy his records, took his records, things like that. The government really scares me when it comes to innovation and technology, right? So you're absolutely 100% correct. I think when you talked about, there really is, I had the same argument. There really is no Democrat or Republican anymore. They want it to appear as a division to put people against each other, because we all know that if you divide, you can conquer. But if everybody comes together, that's a real threat. So it's all one big corporation. They share the money, they make deals with each other. They set themselves up for after they get out of office. You see George Bush at the wedding of Clinton's daughter. You see George Bush and his group with Biden at the inauguration. It's plain to see that there's connections, and they have monetary connections and business connections, but they want to polarize the people because they want you to believe there's a division within the government. And the more you fight each other, the weaker the people get. And the money that we spend on defense spending, if we spent that same amount that we spend on defense spending with, let's say, I don't know, technology, we would be at a different place in time. It would be completely different. And, and it's no secret either that when you have a recession, and when you're struggling economically in a country, what's the best solution that makes money? Is war. And that's always been what's pulled us out of a recession or a dark time, is some mass conflict, because that gets the spending going. The budget for the defense goes up, and companies come together and try to fight this war together. So it creates jobs, it creates money. And that's just how this country's been driven from the inception of 1776. Is it's all about conflict. And I think until we can back away from that and start learning that, hey, there are bigger things to conquer rather than a desert environment or a group of people that have ill intent. If we stop getting involved in other people's problems and look more towards how we can defend ourselves, not attack, but defend ourselves, and advanced technology, we'll be at a much better place. Another thing too, hackers. So when you take the term hackers and you look at the advancement and innovation in the technological industry, really the people who've made the biggest advances are the hackers. And in a true sense of the word, looking at how to make technology better, how we break it down and take it apart, and look at ways we can build advances into that technology. If it weren't for hackers, we wouldn't have the technology we have today. And that's another thing that a lot of governments around the world fear, is that capability that hackers have, that mindset and that thinking to advance on what's already been created, because they want that power. They want the power to be able to control and to be the ones to do the innovation in their mindset, which is not always the best way. So there's a lot of fear and stuff like that when it comes to hackers. And really, I equate a lot of that to the Salem witch trials. If you have that capability, you're on a list somewhere. We were talking about this the other day with Listen Night, and I was talking about it yesterday on the podcast with Clint, is that the amount of lists that I'm on is just unreasonable. DHS, OFAC, TSA. The TSA list killed me. Every time I went, I got the 4 S's on the boarding pass, and I'm like, okay, you say this is supposed to be random, but it happens to me every single flight, so it's not that random. So yeah, I mean, it's like winning the bad lottery.
You hit again the nail on the head. So Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, talked about how he was successful because he didn't follow the rules. And any CEO that you talk to, they're pretty much going to say the same thing. So I encourage hackers, and that's why another reason why I love hackers. Don't follow the rules. You think outside the box. Always question why. And we have to do that if we're going to actually come back together. Because if we only follow the rules are not made for us to be successful. They're not made to bring us together. They're not even made to make us happy. And we're supposed to have in the U.S. Life, liberty, and happiness. Pursuit life, liberty, and happiness. I think that's gone. That's out the window. And the only way that we're going to be able to pursue that life, liberty, and happiness is to question everything. Question why. Don't follow the masses. In fact, there's a lot of information out there that proves following the masses is the wrong path. So hackers, please keep innovating. And I want to talk to you and learn about how and why you're innovating, because that's what's going to make us stronger. It's what's going to make us better. It's what's going to make us live to 300. And I need your help in living to 300.
I would love to do that. I think Obi-Wan Kenobi was actually somewhere around 300 at one point. So yeah, like that whole idea is that's what fuels me, is question. And that's kind of what turned me against the government at one point, was the more questioning I did and the answers I actually got was not what I expected. And I think that we're starting to see a lot more of that. A lot more truth is coming to the surface when it comes to what's really going on. And we're starting to see that, that life, liberty, and happiness, those unalienable rights are gone. I think what we're left with is life, maybe in some points. But even that's questioned at some points with like law enforcement and what they've done with brutality. So yeah, I mean, it is our responsibility to question. It is our responsibility to, when things get out of control, it's our responsibility to take it back. And that's kind of where a lot of the hacktivism thoughts and theories came from. But even that got skewed because the government got involved. But Max, I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I would love to have you on again sometime very soon. And we'll cover some more of the topics that we see out there in the world.
Well,
Do send us the link for the survey so we can share with people and they can obviously help you with your research.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. It'll be a couple more months. But yeah, absolutely, Alex. And I'm pretty easily reached on LinkedIn. So, and for the most part, I connect with almost everybody, unless they look like a troll or they just don't post anything. But I welcome any connections. Yeah. I have to thank you for giving me this opportunity, Mike. I'm impressed with the people that you've had on your podcast, to have my name alongside like Alyssa Knight, Chris Roberts, Jason Street, so many others. They are people that I look up to as exceptional humans, and they all have kind hearts. As well as you, Mike. I think your heart is so big, and thank you for being who you are. I'd love to be back on someday.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Like you said, if you want to be a millionaire, surround yourself with millionaires, right?
Exactly.
So with that being said, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you on the next podcast. And make sure you follow Max Justice on LinkedIn. Very great topics today, and I look forward to the next conversation. I'll see you guys then.